All right, well, diving right into this, welcome back to Tangents and Shenanigans. I'm here with my best bud, Jacob,
Hello.
and we are going to be talking about Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Now, for you and I both, um, when do you remember the first time you've seen this movie?
Oh, well, it's got to be before 14. It's probably got to be like, I'm, I don't know exactly what age, but I'd probably have to say like,
13, 14 or
oh,
so?
no, I feel like maybe like 12 or
Okay.
11. I feel like that's when I probably was old enough to like, have a sit down with my folks and say, watch this. And like this, I mean, it's not inappropriate, but I mean, maybe
No,
for someone who's like 8, they might not get it.
that's true. Yeah, as far as like some of the innuendos and just some of the references. Well, the thing is, and like this came out in 1986, and John Hughes. I mean, I love a lot. I love a lot of John Hughes films, especially like Uncle Buck, um, and then Breakfast Club, obviously. Um,
I was just gonna say this is definitely one of those coming of age movies where
yes,
I feel like the most um, obvious sister or sibling to it would be Breakfast Club. Like if I was to tell like high school kids or teens to watch a film that I think would be really impactful for their time of their lives, I would say this, and I would say Breakfast Club.
yeah, no, 100%. And what's interesting is what I found out about this movie is um, the I forget his name, but the guy that played Brian in The Breakfast Club was originally going to be casted as Ferris. And then he got, I think there was like scheduling conflicts with other movies that he was doing, but I don't see this movie being the same if the cast had been switched. I mean, don't you agree with like a lot of movies that you see and it comes out and then you see like who the other options were or the other
Yeah,
like runner-ups and you're just like, I don't see that working. Like the
you're saying
chemistry
Brian Johnson was going to be Ferris?
from Breakfast Club. Yeah, the guy that played
Yeah,
Brian. Yeah.
no,
Um
absolutely not. This would not have been no, absolutely not.
I don't
There's
think
no way.
I don't think he could have fit the same persona because if you look at this movie just as personalities, like Ferris Bueller is a total personality where and this is the thing that I wanted to touch up on like in the beginning of the movie which I also found out like when it's just him in the room faking being sick parents leaving and then he like has the whole monologue to the camera and I actually like that in movies and I think that's one of the other reasons why in the movie Deadpool at the end of the credits they reference this movie like, oh, you're still here, the movie's over, go home. All of that was done after the rest of the film was made, and what's interesting is none of it was scripted, it was all ad-libbed. So Matthew Broderick did all of that without following a script, and I'm like, dude, it's so iconic though, because even hearing him talk about I don't believe in isms, and like I'm missing out on a test today, and they're talking about European socialism, and he's like, come on guys, I'm first of all. I'm not European. I don't plan on being European. So who gives a fuck if they're socialists or not? And I mean, I can't relate any more to this character than I already do because he's a character that represents enjoying the leisure part of life as much as you can. And one of his iconic lines is, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop around to look for a while, you can miss it. And I mean, how fitting is that for you and I right now? Like, how often do we like have moments where we like reminisce? And it's like, fuck, like how long has it been since I've been in high school? So it's
Oh, well, I just hung out with some old high school friends and we had the same words over 10 years where it's like we've been to high school multiple times over. That's how long we've been out of high school. But to add to your point, I mean, Ferris Bueller, I mean, that's such a great fact to talk about. That a lot of that was just kind of improv ad lib talking because
mhm.
it really sells it.
It
Like
does. It,
because you almost feel like it's not scripted. You feel where it's really becoming genuine,
hmm.
which is what you need to believe his character, and not have him come off as kind of an asshole or kind of just kind of a prick. Sorry, but Ferris Bueller, after watching this, is like the physical manifestation about just being present and just
Yeah.
being. like a human being and just being alive. And it's almost as if, like, I feel like you can look at this film from two perspectives. Like, there's one perspective where it's kind of like that movie Paddington, where he's, or like even like Johnny Depp as Captain Jack Sparrow, where he's
Hmm.
not really the lead, like he's not the one driving the plot. He's just the one bringing out internal plots of his surrounding cast, which I think that Ferris Bueller does, especially for like Fry. It's very strong with Fry's character and with what was his sister Jeannie. I feel like Ferris
Yeah.
Bueller really brings out the arc in those two. So I feel like you could look at it from that perspective. And then the other perspective, which I'm trying to see if I can recall off the top of my head now, is by him being present, by him being kind of, what he needs to be for the audience.
I see where
Was,
you're.
I had it, and then it just went like a fleeting dream.
No, I see. God, that happens all the time for me. But no, to add on to what you were saying, I first of all I agree because even though he is he's the focal point of the story, I feel like he's also the motivation factor for his best friend Cameron. Who, I mean, if you look at them, they're polar opposites. Ferris is confident. He has charisma. He's not afraid to do something rambunctious to help out his friends, and that's what this movie is trying to get Cameron out of his funk, because Cameron's character is someone that's kind of deprived of an actual relationship with his parents, his.
And also Jeannie out of her comparison, out of her slump and her bitterness towards other people's circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because
Like
she.
she's living the life, and I feel like those are two paths that are very, you have to tread very lightly down, which is the path of Fry, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but the path of Fry, which is the path of conflict avoidance, the
Mm-hmm.
path of aversion from conflict, and to just kind of go with the flow and just keep your head down. And then you have Jeannie, where she's having this conflict, and like that's something as an adult you just kind of slip into, like modern society, and being an adult is just there's kind of two ways of going up, multiple ways of going about your life once you become an adult. And I feel like that's definitely one of them, which is, oh, just like I work this 9 to 5, keep my head down, just work hard, just don't piss anyone off, just trying to make everyone happy, which is exhausting for your own identity. But then you have like Jeannie, who is just so angry about what everyone else has, like what everyone else, like I mean, it's mainly Ferris Bueller, but she's like, I'm not being heard, which is a valid point. But it's mainly like he gets to do whatever he wants, and I
Mm-hmm.
can't do anything. Like I can't do what he does. Like I can't get away with it. And she's focused so much on that comparison that she's forgetting that she's her own human being. She's like, hey, you can have your own path. That's not going to be his. I mean, and if was it Teddy Roosevelt's quote? Comparison's the thief of joy. I mean, she's just for the whole time, she's just pent up and just cursing him and hating everything about it. Which, I mean, to be fair, it's everywhere. She can't have a day without being in his shadow. But once she kind of steps out from that and does her and kind of accepts that's going to be his path and my path is different, that's when she becomes much more accepting, and at the very end even supports him. So
Right, and I think that's also attributed to the conversation she has with Charlie Sheen's character, in who's I think his character's name was Garth, um, and
Garth.
which was.
Does he even say his name? Oh, it is Garth.
Yeah, it is Garth. And because they have, I mean, this is maybe towards the third act of the film where Jeannie's taken into the police station for what was it again? She skipped school, right? But she was brought in. I
She,
forget.
she made a false police call. Like she made a false because she said that
Oh,
there
yeah,
was
yeah,
someone in
yeah.
our,
I
which
I feel.
that would not fly today. You would not be arrested for making a call of, like, I mean, especially with what you can do nowadays. There's no way you're being arrested for making a false 911 call if you're that hysterical.
Well, I mean, to her, in her defense, there was. I mean, obviously, we'll get into this little later. We're jumping ahead, but yeah, there's a moment in the film where the principal, played by Jeffrey Jones, Ed Rooney. I love his character, by the way. Um, but he ends up breaking into the house, and she fucking kicks him in the face multiple times and gets him out. Um, but
I'm
yeah, like
surprised she had a gun. She said, "I have a gun," and I'm like, "Oh,
she also
I
says
didn't know we had
something.
firearms in this house."
She also says something else that I will not repeat, but it's hilarious. But going back to like all of the characters and back to what you were saying, I couldn't agree more because you do see each of these characters having different personas and having different conflicts, and um, I think that this is, and again, talking about like how I feel this movie is more relatable, it is kind of a message to enjoy the youth while you still have it. Like, be wild, be crazy, don't be afraid, don't be so critical about your own actions, because all of that will fade eventually. So it is important to enjoy the little things, even if you get into trouble sometimes, because at the end of the day, you'll have so many stories to tell. I mean, as long as it's not hurting anyone, or you're
Yeah,
not like your intent is in the right place. Fuck it, get
and
in
that,
trouble, do something
and not
bad.
not to be so carried away with tomorrow, not to be so fixated on tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
because all of these characters, you notice that he is the only. I mean, he brings it up, but everyone else starts bringing up the future. Like, I want to go to college. I want to go do this
Yeah,
because
what
it
do you want to
seems
do with your
as
life? What are you interested in? And
yeah, like what is Ferris gonna do? Oh, he's gonna be a line cook or whatever, a fry or what I think whatever like Fry calls it. But they're all so fixated on what tomorrow is, and he's the only one that's just trying to be in the moment, trying to make the most of what today is. Like, and it is kind of like a obviously make sure you value your youth, make sure you kind of pause and enjoy your environment. But that can also apply even to our age, even to someone who's like 60. Like, it doesn't matter what age you are. Like, I think he's really trying to sell, like, it doesn't, there's no point where you have it and then it's gone. I
mm-hmm.
mean, maybe when you're on your deathbed, that might be the case, but there's no like, oh, well, I'm 60 now, which means my life's over. Because I think so much of us kind of, we have this definitive, determination about what our future is going to be. And then like once it's manifested, we're saying, oh, this is our environment now. And there's nothing more. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing new. And I wanted to make the comment, Garth, Charlie Sheen's character,
Yeah.
I feel like he's also a Ferris Bueller, but like in terms of luck not being on his side. I feel like Garth has the same energy, the same characteristics as Ferris, but Ferris just got more lucky, and his environment was a much more privileged environment where he didn't make those choices. I just I remember watching this last night, and I'm like, he's kind of the same, which although made the sister character a little awkward to me. I mean, they're not in personality the same, but in terms of their values, I think that they were the same. And I just thought that was so fascinating.
Yeah, because Garth's character was very. I mean, even when we're introduced to him, I mean, he looks strung out. He even says he's there for drugs. But he's very like cool, cool and like calm and collected. And immediately you can tell he's one of those people that can read body language and read what's on people's mind before they even say it, just based on how they interact. And he can immediately tell just from a few sentences of what she's sharing of what's going on in her life that you're too conflicted by everyone else's decisions that are being made around you, and you're not really taking any responsibility for who you are as a person. So even though your brother gets away with all of this, like your issue is yourself. Like you latch onto these things that you have no control over. And I mean, that's also a very relatable statement because how many times, I mean, I can tell you, like there are things that happen whether it's at work or in my personal life that I don't have control over, and I have to remind myself that there are areas where I can control or make this work to my advantage, but I have to release the ability to control everything. And I feel like Jeannie's character, her biggest conflict is that she's so upset with the world. She doesn't get away with the same things. Kind of like what you were saying earlier. Um,
Mhm. It's definitely a victim mentality. I
that
mean, both
that too.
both
That
Fry
too.
and yeah, both Fry and Genie play a victim. in their own right.
So I'm actually curious. So like going into the movie and trying to break it down. So obviously we already talked about the opening scene. And it sets up that Ferris is, he's in the senior year. He's about to graduate, and he's trying to make this last sick day the greatest. And he wants his two best friends to be there. Sloane, played by Mia Sara, and who was actually 18 at the time, and Matthew Broderick was 25 playing an 18-year-old. So I also thought that was interesting. um, and then
That was the theme for high school movies, and even up until the 2000s, that all the high school kids were
in their
25,
mid 20s, yeah, or
their
even
mid
borderline
20s.
30s.
Even that actress in Grease, what was it? The one that sings Sandra D.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's that one. She was 33 years old.
Yeah, exactly. And they still got casted for these high schoolers. I'm like, I don't know if they still do that anymore. I feel like they are casting a lot younger, but
I feel
then,
like 18, 19 is more the average.
mm-hmm. Um, well, as as the plot moves forward, we finds an elaborate scheme to get Sloane out of school by faking her grandmother's death, and Cameron, who also stayed home from school, is in bed.
It's the only one that no one challenged him being
Yeah,
sick. They're just like, their
which
life's miserable. No point in the plot. They're like, yeah, Karen, why is he sick again? They're like, he's gone. He doesn't. We know why he's gone. Almost. It's kind of sad.
I mean, it's sad because you understand that he goes even throughout school. No one talks about him. He stays under the radar. Types of people that would just want to exist in life, and then
Well, he's
watch.
very risk. Yeah, he's very risk adverse. Yeah, very just kind of give me the like minimize discomfort. Like I just want to be comfortable. And to be honest, that's a very logical thing of someone who's probably gone through some kind of trauma,
Yeah.
which they don't really dive too into. But I mean, that is kind of sad. There's just some people who are like, look, my personal life is just hell. And so I'm going to do my best. They even say, like, hey, he feels better when he's sick. It's like, oh my God, you feel better when you're under the weather? Like, how bad is your home life?
And that's the question that us, the audience, is left to question. Because we never see his parents. Um, in in retrospect, we see Ferris's parents, and they seem, like very loving, endearing parents, and obviously having a favoritism towards Ferris than Jeannie. I think they're a little bit more strict with Jeannie. But the the issue with Cameron is that because we don't see the parents, um, he makes one comment when Ferris calls him, like, "Hey, come over here and pick me up." And he asks, like, "Is your mom around, or is your mom in the room?" And he's like, "No, she's in Decatur, and unfortunately, she's not staying." And when we hear how he feels about his dad, like he's kind of scared of his dad, and so we don't know what kind of trauma Cameron went through, and for how long even. So I also think that's something important to take into consideration for his overall character. And to be honest, I think that out of all of the characters, Cameron and Jeannie I would say have the biggest arcs. Maybe more so Cameron
Yes.
and then Jeannie to be
I
second.
think if they conflict with the main character the most.
Yeah. And so now that we have we go to the school and we see Edward Rooney. Well, oh my gosh. Okay, so when Edward Rooney is making the call to Ferris's mom to be like, "Hey, like, just let you know, your son's not here," and she's like, "Oh my God, totally forgot to call. I'm sorry. Yes, he is homesick. I can assure you." Um, and then Edward Rooney brings up like, "Well, he also has missed 90s of school," and I'm gonna tell you right now, the way Mr. Rooney was talking to the mom. Can you imagine, like, your mom or my mom even to be accepting that tone that he had? I mean, he was saying things like, He's just leading you down the primrose path. He's like faking. He's faking being sick. You need to wake up and smell the coffee, Mrs. Bueller. And I'm like, excuse me? Like, if I was the parent, I'd be like, hold on, buddy. You're not talking to me like that. Um,
Oh, I didn't even think about that, but yeah, that wouldn't fly. Even when we were in high school, that wouldn't fly today.
no, but that's what I'm saying. I mean, maybe that would come up, but I don't even think the deans would have time for that unless it was something that was damaging other kids. Then it's like, hey, we need you to come in. But no, I just noticed that. Just the direct tone that Ed Rooney had. But you can also tell just from that conversation how meticulous he is about his desk, how like appalled he is at people just with the pure concept of people having fun, taking a day off. He rolls his eyes. Like you can tell like this guy just he hates his job, but he wants to be right. And he loves being right. And he wants to prove that like his whole motive throughout this movie is proving that Ferris Bueller is cheating out of high school. And he thinks he can get the easy way. I was like, no, dude, I'm gonna find you. I'm gonna go out in the world and find you in the city where you're spending all this time having fun. And so that's like his whole mission throughout this movie. But one of the things I'd noticed,
Well, that actually brings up an interesting
hmm,
where maybe that's where another conflict comes in because obviously Fry and Jeannie have a conflict with the main character, especially its values. But I mean, even Edward Rooney, it's obvious there's a rivalry, but maybe there's a conflict with Edward Rooney in terms of, I feel like for him, I mean, they don't dive into it, but I mean, he kind of portrays this character as someone who doesn't quite fit in. Doesn't quite fit in with the crowd. Kind of a little alienating
mm-hmm.
himself. Sometimes like when he walks, I mean, fast forward a little bit when he goes into that
The dive
that
bar with the
yeah,
arcade.
the arcade and even some of the stuff he does there, and he's just not fully aware of his surroundings. But I mean, his thing could be that he has some self-esteem issues, or there was some kind of unresolved like rejection that maybe he had. And so seeing someone who receives a pot, because even what was it, his assistant? I'm trying to remember what her name was, Mrs.
Grace.
Grace.
Yeah, Grace.
He's okay. He's obviously his job is to discipline students. So he sees someone where he's suspicious of the person's integrity as a student. And then he's literally hearing his assistant go, "Hey, everyone likes him, and
Mm-hmm.
he's a righteous dude." And like,
Yeah, she does say that.
awesome guy. And I bet you that really digs into him, maybe in terms of, for him, he goes, and maybe he had some sort of rejection from his youth, from his high school. And anyway, you have this kind of maybe like, a lot of times judgment comes from a place of insecurity. Maybe there's this self esteem where he's watching this kid who gets to do whatever he wants, not follow the rules, and people like him for that. I bet you he had someone in high school that he hated that acted just like that
Oh,
when he was.
absolutely.
And so it's kind
100%.
of like his personal vendetta where he's like, no, I'm not letting another kid under my authority run around and make me look like a fool. Maybe like when I was in high school and someone like that made me feel inadequate. So I feel like that's where the conflict comes in. And he's so fixated on like the justice, not so much justice, but like revenge.
Revenge. Like
And
he's totally egotistical.
yeah, and then by the end of it, he keeps getting punished for diet. I mean, what is it? He gets spat in the face. He gets made a fool of. He gets attacked by a dog. His outfit gets totally trashed. He gets assaulted in a house. His car gets towed, and like he finally gets his revenge, but it doesn't even matter because he's like the sacrifice and the exposure that he's put himself in, like he can't do anything with it. It's like what means are you gonna get to this end? And like it doesn't even become valuable. It's kind of like people who obsess over some kind of goal, and by the time you get there, it's not even worth the fruit. And so I feel like that could be another art, like kind of like one of those four square, what do they call it, like the four square conflict or character moral arcs. I bet you he's like the far corner of that from Ferris Bueller. It's really interesting.
It is.
They do spend a lot of time on him, so it's got to mean something.
Right. Yeah, cuz it always cuz it the the movie shares scenes between him trying to investigate where Ferris is, and is always a step behind, or several steps behind for that matter. Then you have scenes with Jeannie, and then you have scenes obviously with the three, the three friends, and then you get scenes going back to the father and the mother of Ferris. Which also a fun fact. On During the movie production, those two actors that played the parents, Cindy Pickett, who plays the mother, Katie
This
Bueller,
Katie. Yeah.
and the father, Lyman Ward, or Lyman Ward. His character's name is Tom Bueller. They actually got together after this movie, and
Oh, like they got married?
I think they got
Oh, they
married and had
did.
kids, but I don't think the marriage lasted. But I did think that was interesting. That and you hear about this all the time, like on-set romances. Sometimes it lasts, sometimes it doesn't. Most of the time, it doesn't. But I thought that was pretty sweet that they played parents in this movie, and then they actually, got together and I'm pretty sure they had kids together. I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm almost certain that that's what I had heard. Um, and I think Matthew Broderick and Jennifer Grey, played by Jeannie, I think they also sparked a short romance together, but obviously didn't last. Um, and well, anyways, that was just a little fun fact. But I do agree with what you were saying about Ed Rooney. And what I did want to circle back to is like some of the details during that conversation that Ed Rooney is having with the mom. It pans over to Grace, and you just see Grace like pulling things out of her hair. It starts with like a pencil, and then she pulls a pen out, and then I'm like, what the like I don't know, it's one of those like unseen comedy moments where it's like there's no dialogue happening, but she's just randomly pulling things out of her hair. And I'm like, God, that's funny. And obviously like after the phone call, Ed is talking to Grace, kind of like consoling with her, saying like I'm gonna get this Ferris Bueller. And I forget the line he says. I don't trust this kid any more than I can throw him. And
And he's
Grace
like,
is like,
"Oh, with your back or your shoulder, you can't throw anybody."
with your bad backhand, you shouldn't be throwing anybody. And I love Grace. Grace as a character is hilarious. Because there's a scene where the same scene where Ed is talking to Ferris's mom, he's looking at the computer, telling her that he's been absent 9 times, and then it shows the number going down, from like 9 to 8, 7, so on and so forth, and then it stops at 2 days absent, and then it quickly transitions over to Ferris, and then it shows him on the computer hacking into the school system and correcting the days absent. And he's like, and he has a little line where he says, "I asked for a car for my birthday and I got a computer. How's that of being born under a bad sign?" And it's like,
Which
dude, you're already a mischievous person, and now you have the world at your fingertips through the access of your computer. I thought that was pretty funny.
Which,
Um,
by the way, here's how this movie can feel dated. I bet you, fast forward to today, more kids today would rather say that if they had the car, not the computer, that they might feel cursed. Like they might feel like they got slighted.
because they don't have like access at their fingertips.
Well, yeah, and I also know a lot of younger kids who, I mean, they didn't drive until 20
Hmm.
or like 19 or 18. It wasn't when they were 16 they got a car. I mean, when we were 16, even when we were in high school, there were a lot of kids who were like, I'm okay, I don't need to drive a car. But, then even as the years have gone on, it's just the urge to drive is not as high as other generations. So I find that ironic because when I heard that line, I was like, I bet you a lot of kids today would rather have the computer than the car.
I think you're right though, because if you think about like our generation, I mean, I mean, I think we both got our phones when we were a teenager, and most kids nowadays are pretty much born with it in their hands, or borrowing their mom's iPad or something like that. So they already are born with that immediate access. And I mean, I even think of like my nieces and on on how knowledgeable of meme culture they know. It's like, what are you doing? Like, how do you know this? You should not know this right now at your age. But that's the world we live in, you know? Just like Bo Burnham said, we designed it to do all the things that we wanted it to do. And we've been waiting for you to use it. So, by the way, I love that special. Honestly, tangent. I listened to that album the other day. I fucking love that album. I
Mhm.
love it so much.
And just to any viewers that are out there, this is Inside by Bo Burnham, which came out in 2021, which was like the perfect time for the release. Well, he designed it or during COVID, but it was such a relevant piece even today.
And what's interesting about that is I mean, personally, he had been going through a personal struggle before he decided to go back to do live comedy, and it happened to be like right before the pandemic hit in 2020. He's like, well, looks like I have to put that on hold. Well, but I still want to make content, so I'm gonna do this at home. And a side note, I love that we watched it together because that was not only was that one of the best like comedy specials I'd ever seen. Obviously, there's an appreciation for things that you share with your loved ones, and I'm sure that that is also correlated to how I feel about that. But um, I feel like a lot of the lyrics in his songs are so meaningful, and I think that's why I gravitate to like listening to it every now and then because I still believe a lot of what he was saying is pretty relevant, you know. But anyways, so let's see. Going back to the film,